And we're back. You like the new shirt? I do. Senator Shawn Mitchell, an old friend, good guy, and you'll be out of politics at the end of this year.
It's time to make a living, John. Grow up and figure out what I'm going to be.
And what is that, 14? You're term limited out of the Senate.
I am term limited.
All right, so 6 years.
And still a believer in term limits, by the way.
Really?
Even though the axe is going to hit me. You know, we need turnover, we need fresh ideas. You've been there too long, you start getting comfortable with wielding power. Turnover is good.
Oh, we'll see what you say in a year. I want my job back.
Well, that's true.
Now, you had, what, 6 years in the House before you went to the Senate?
I did.
What were the majorities then?
In the House, I was in the Republican majority, and you know, it was fascinating. We used to have fiery debates, and I would watch the Democrats argue their hearts out and wonder, what would it be like to know you were going to lose the vote, and wonder what kind of character it took them to get out of bed and come to work in the morning. For the last 8 years in the Senate, I have seen the other side of that coin, and I've been the one making the fiery debate knowing I'm going to lose.
The Senate has been democratically controlled now for 8 years? Has it been 8?
For 8 years.
Oh,
yeah.
Time flies.
And for most of it, it's been with a Democratic governor as well.
Good. Actually, yeah, that's right, except for the first 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
Owens was governor for my first 2 years in the Senate, and that kind of kept things balanced. But after that, Ritter, and now Hickenlooper.
Let's talk about some of the things that can get done and some of the things that can't get done. You've been a good champion on all sorts of things. Of course, when you're in the minority, you get to shoot spears at the other people, and you don't have a whole lot to lose. You don't have to keep a coalition together. Keeping a coalition together is really difficult, which is why Republicans fall apart when they're in the majority so quickly. But you've had some good success on drug sentencing reform and other issues. There's a weird coalition growing here. You
know, there are some interesting opportunities for bridge building between small government liberals, I don't know if they exist, but personal liberty liberals and small government conservatives. And I'm not having success yet on drug sentencing. I'm still pushing that bill forward. But in the past, I've had success on limiting eminent domain, government seizing private property, on civil forfeiture, police seizing property from suspects. This year,
because that's something that speaks to civil libertarians.
Yes.
And it also speaks to us free marketers that we don't want government to be able to take our stuff without the right due process.
Without a fair trial and conviction and a judgment that you're a bad guy and you have to forfeit.
Talk to me about drug possession, and if you have some, I'd like some. But
don't know where, John.
We've got a huge problem of overcapacity in a lot of our jails and prisons because of drug sentencing. And finally, it's starting to push to an issue where people are willing to talk about. And thank God for recessions, because people are willing to talk about things they wouldn't talk about before. What are you trying to spearhead?
Well, you touched on one of the considerations, prison crowding, but I think that any rational observer will look at our war on drugs and say we're not winning it. Drugs are still plentiful, abundant on the street, lots of addicts. We're making government more powerful, we're making police departments well armed, but we're not solving the drug problem. And we're making citizens more vulnerable to overreach by their government. I'm proud to be part of, back to the idea of a coalition between left and right. I'm sponsoring Senate Bill 163. There are some, my co-sponsor is Pat Stedman in the Senate. He's considered more liberal. I'm more conservative.
I would hope so.
Yeah, thank you. The idea is to fight a smarter war on drugs, and the basic mechanism is to change the penalty for personal use from felony to misdemeanor with some important consequences. Number one, we'll have some prison bed savings, and we'll use that money for treatment, addiction counseling, recovery, and so forth.
That sounds awfully soft and warm and fuzzy. I expect better from you.
Well, I'd like to, brand a drug user or something, but no. If we're going to respond at all, if society is going to intervene, instead of throwing people in prison, let's counsel and treat. It doesn't make any sense to say, stop ruining your life with poison. Instead, we're going to ruin your life with a felony. And that's the other aspect of this. By changing the sentencing level from felony to misdemeanor, we preserve opportunities for the rest of someone's life. Because once you have a felony on your record, harder to get a job, harder to
get a loan, harder to get a place to live, harder to get a lease, right.
Yeah.
All right. So now that you've really turned soft on crime and want drug users everywhere.
Let's make one point. There's crime that victimizes others, that predators hit victims, and there's crime where you're hurting yourself. And obviously society's attitude about the two should be different, and that's what this is about.
How do you define possession, the personal use, compared to somebody who's selling? So do you have to say in every class of drug, up to this amount is personal use, anything above that is something higher? How do you judge it?
That's the concept. We don't set a different level for all different drugs. I'm trying to remember. I should be able to tell you the number, but
because I had some friends in college that personal use could have been a pound a day.
Well, the short answer is personal use quantities are charged at misdemeanor. Above a certain level, and I can't remember, I think it's 4 grams, but above a certain level will still be a felony. But the personal use level will shift from felony to misdemeanor. Above that, too much can still be a felony. And if there's any indication of dealing, baggies, different compartments, it's still a serious felony, a class 3 felony. So we're not letting drug dealers off the hook. We'll go after them with hard felony consequences. But for addicts, for people just struggling and facing a weakness and a challenge, there's a better response. For society's safety, those aren't the people we want to be spending money on beds in jails. Those are the people that, if society is going to react, we want to help.
All right, let me do devil's advocate here. Come on, man. What are you talking about? You're going to make it easier for people to get drugs. You're going to take away the risk of them having serious legal consequences, so you're only encouraging more serious drug use.
I'd like to think that when people face these choices, how their government will respond is not the most important factor they consider. There are other states, there are a lot of states that are experimenting and in fact that have made serious progress with misdemeanor charges instead of felony charges. Portugal, for example, and let me back up and make another point here. This is not legalization. This is not decriminalization. This is a different criminal penalty which focuses more on treatment and counseling than on just warehousing people in prison.
And for those who really don't get this, when you run a stop sign, that's a misdemeanor. You made a mistake.
That's a petty offense.
That's a petty. And that, all right, what's a misdemeanor? Give me
Misdemeanor would, minor theft, minor assault, something that you'll go to jail generally for less than a year. More than a year heads up into felony territory. Felony offenses put you in State Department of Corrections. Misdemeanor offenses put you in county jail.
All right. So basically you're saying if you're doing personal use of drugs, instead of putting you in the big house, we might just put you in the small house. Or we might let you stay at home and get some treatment.
And get some treatment, counseling, exactly. And you know what? You may or may not be aware, I have a brother who has struggled with his challenge for over a decade. He has struggled with meth addiction. And I see his challenges, I see his life fall apart. He's lost family, home, job, career, and he's trying to put things together, but almost entirely he's hurting himself, not committing violent offenses against others. So what is our interest in making him a felon? What is our interest in putting him behind bars? If society's going to spend resources, let's improve it, not just punish it.
Talk to me a little bit about the coalition. That is, the kind of things you've just said, which is it's cheaper, it's a personal decision, the war on drugs hasn't been a success, it's only given us larger government.
Militarized our police.
Yeah. But how do you go and talk to the law and order type Republicans, which I still think are a majority of Republicans, and get them to see this way? I mean, they're the ones who say, hey, listen, nobody should be doing drugs. It's bad for society. We have a role for this because there's all sorts of externalities when these people can't keep their lives together. They fall in the public dole. It costs us more money. How are you gonna make that message to them?
There are a lot of threads in what you just said. Let me see how many I can remember. Law and order, I say, first, shouldn't you chase people who are victimizing others? Now, it's true that addicts can neglect others, but they don't generally prey. If they steal to support their habit, if they commit violence against someone, those are crimes that can be charged and punished separately. But it's not simple. The ugly fact of drug use, that's different. That's doing damage and violence to yourself, and we should respond more focused on that harm. Gosh, there were a couple other directions I wanted to go with that, and my mind is blank. So,
all right, law and order. That we want to make sure that social costs go down. That what we're doing is giving an example that this is okay. More people are going to do it. It's going to cost us more.
Thanks for.
Yeah, and I'm the one with Alzheimer's. Funny.
You're, yeah. I guess the question to ask folks who still want a felony hammer or want a big government approach is, is what we're doing working? And I started to mention to you Portugal, who is experimenting actually with something much more aggressive than this policy, which is decriminalization. Portugal no longer prosecutes drug use. I believe it prosecutes dealers, I'm not sure, but it focuses entirely on treatment. And contrary to the fears you just described, drug use has gone down in Portugal.
Yeah, it's one of the wild cases. We've always seen in Amsterdam where drug use is prevalent and open, where marijuana is sold in coffee shops right next to the police, and it seems to work. But that's kind of an isolated, weird Vegas of Europe, if you will. Portugal doing it, the predictions of mass use and the increase of drug use going haywire never came true. Why?
Because the state punishing people isn't the effective agent in change. People need to want to change, and the drug war that we've been pursuing hasn't really brought that about. So what happened in Portugal is, instead of throwing people in jail where you don't get treatment, you don't overcome your addiction, you're just separated from it for a while, then you get out and you chase it again. Instead, they focused on treatment. And the other benefit to de-escalating the war on drugs is that you eliminate the part where the government makes dealers richer, where government acts as a barrier to entry and gives a profit margin to the people that are in the bad guys that are in the field.
This fall there's likely to be a marijuana initiative. It's going to be for recreational use statewide. Last time it was on, it got killed, almost 60-40. It got pummeled. It will do much better this year. Is that something you would support?
I would look hard at supporting it, and I think it would be a more honest approach than medical marijuana that we have, which is really just legalization in a hospital scrub drag. Medical marijuana is using the aches and pains of some serious injured and sick and hurting people as an excuse to kind of do backdoor legalization. I think we should have an honest debate and go up or down on marijuana legalization. Not to endorse drugs, but to say that government suppressing them causes more problems often than the drug use itself.
Well, we got about a minute left, but let me ask you this side of it. I would think that hardcore conservatives, fiscal conservatives, federalist-leaning conservatives who don't trust Washington would be very dubious of drug laws, since they're so intertwined with Washington, D.C. That it's not just locally done here any longer. It is the DEA coming in, trying to get local law enforcement to do the work. Is this federal overreach?
Well, 2 points. When you mention fiscal issues, of course, we should also acknowledge what you talked about earlier, which is our prison beds are too crowded. Number two, yeah, the federal government steering this, controlling what happens in the states, that's not the constitutional model. States should have day-to-day governance, and people should make decisions closer to home.
You just want Colorado to be the drug capital, don't you?
No, I don't. I want a better approach to making it not the drug capital.
Nicely said. Good luck with it. Senate Bill 163. Look for it. Listen for me on Sunday afternoons on 6:30 KHOW. Please check us out at the Independence Institute. That's independenceinstitute.org. Tell a friend, and we'll see you next week.